All right, things just got wrapped up in Tampa, Florida for the 2015 PBW Championships, and events that took place, of course, for the 8th consecutive year. I'm sandwiched between two of the great minds in our industry, of course, David Bay and Peter McGuff. Peter, where's the other great mind?
In the middle.
Of course, Bob Chick's back at the podium wrapping up the NPC portion of this contest. But for starters, what an interesting lineup. You know, it's one of those where we walked into this thing, and I think you guys did a great job in your pre-show coverage talking about the fact that it's nice to show up at an event, and unlike other contests where you kind of feel like you have a good, clear sense of who's going to win, David, we showed up here, and there was 3 guys, and it was really up for grabs.
Yeah, Fuad's coming off of 2 wins earlier on this year in Vancouver, and then we saw him earlier on in the year in Orlando. So he's had a really good 2015. Max, I mean, you know, his placing in New York behind Victor Martinez and Juan Morel, 3rd place, but in a really tough lineup. So a good year for him as well. Johnny Jackson, a little bit off earlier on in the year, but, you know, he's one of these guys who you always know eventually he's going to get it right. He did here this weekend. So, yeah, going into the show, you know, you could kind of pick a favorite, but it wasn't one of these shows where you knew hands down somebody was going to walk away with a win.
Well, Max, Fuad, and Johnny, that became the storyline in the last couple of hours. And you talk to 100 people and you get, you know, different answers from everybody. Coming into this thing, I got to be honest with you, as the night progressed, I would have given the edge to Fuad. That's just kind of the way it looked from where I was seated. But a lot of people disagreed. A lot of people felt like Max was just such a presence on that stage, and it was all said and done, he just couldn't be denied this win.
That may be correct. I, on the other hand, think Johnny Jackson won. And I say that completely detached from any Johnny Jackson allegiance. I just think that, you know, each pose they hit, you know, a side chest isn't just a side chest, or a back double biceps isn't just the biceps. It's the whole physique. And I felt that Johnny, on the front poses and the back poses, on the front poses, his chest was out here, his abs were in. Max and Fuad were flat. Same at the back. Johnny had this tremendous thickness at the back with his lats fighting for space on his bone structure. The other guys were wide. Max was particularly wide, but they didn't have that thickness and density. So I wasn't shocked, because when it's close, it's close. We knew the points were close, but I'm a bit disappointed that, you know, I really did see Johnny as the winner. And like I say, I have no allegiance to Johnny. It's just a result that, you see results and you go with the flow. This one is really eating away at me even now. I'm thinking, you know, the guy put everything into it, tried everything, should have won it, and didn't. So there it is, for what it's worth.
And here he is, Johnny Jackson, back at 45 years old. And like you said, I think he did everything that he could to win this thing. Max Charles, your 2013 USA overall champ, top 3 earlier this year in New York. What was the separator for you?
You know, I learned from Peter, and, you know, obviously in my previous judging experience, and what I've always done is when it gets really, really close, I go pose for pose. Front double bicep, I thought, was Max's pose. Front lat spread, I felt that was a toss-up between Max and Fuad, but at the end of the day, Max a little bit wider, so I went with Max. Side chest and side tricep. Side chest, I got to go with Johnny. His chest is so thick when he brings it over. Side tricep, I liked. I thought, again, it was a toss-up between Max and Fuad. When we went to the back shots, you know, Johnny, obviously the density was there. Max a little bit wider than the other guys. Fuad had those nasty, just kind of gnarly hamstrings. So those for me were kind of up in the air, and I didn't have any, you know, definitive winners for those. Came back around, most muscular, the ab shots. So it's like there was a lot of toss-ups for each pose, but there was a couple poses where I had Max definitively winning, them being the most muscular in the front double bicep. So all things considered, I had Max, but it was by a little bit of an edge. As Peter said, Johnny Jackson looked really good. And Fuad, you know, I thought he looked fantastic. You know, I thought it was really tight between those two. I did see Johnny in 3rd, but, you know, had you flipped a coin and put Fuad or Max in 1st or 2nd, I would have been in total agreement either way.
Yeah, we needed a 3-sided coin tonight, and it's been a long time since we've been able to say that, since we've been able to have a legitimate debate over the merits of 3 guys who were that close. I want to stay on Fuad for a second. I was watching some of your pre-show coverage that you guys did leading up to the contest, and you talked about Fuad, and in that coverage, you were talking about whether or not Fuad should have done this contest. Here we are 6 weeks out from the Olympia, and you could make the case Fuad already qualified for the contest. You were suggesting that maybe it wasn't the best play for Fuad. And I got to be honest with you, Peter, I almost took exception to it, because we've been going through this run these last few shows. I'm going to tell you why. we've been going through this run these last few shows where fans, promoters, were getting really upset by the lack of star power in these lineups. Like, enough is enough, guys. Compete, show up. And I thought it was great that Fuad, a guy who's already qualified to the Olympics, he didn't need to do this show, but he showed up here and he wanted to battle. Like back in the old days, back in the 90s when Flex Wheeler would show up at shows where it was a $10,000 prize pool and he'd beat guys like, Chris Cormier and Marc Francois and some of these other great bodybuilders. They'd show up and they'd battle for titles that weren't the Olympia. They weren't the Arnold Classic because they wanted to throw down, they wanted to connect with their fans, and they wanted to battle. And for me, I think we should be celebrating when a guy like Fuad, who didn't need to be here, shows up and he competes.
I wasn't being critical of it. I mean, I agree with you in many instances that, you want to see guys doing more than one qualifier and going into the Olympia. But I also qualified it by saying I think maybe Fuad's strategy was, the more times you get ready for a contest, the better you are, even if it's 6 weeks out. So I'm a great believer in, in the old days, the guys used to hit condition. But apart from Mr. Olympia, they were competing maybe 3 or 4 times a year. They go on the European tour and whatever. So they got more in touch with the body. They're better at peaking. And maybe that's what Fuad decided to do. Let's have another dry run before the Olympia. Tinker with a couple of things, see if it works, and then take it on board for the Olympia. Yeah, I'm all for these guys. Guys don't compete enough. I mean, this year has been pretty shallow in a lot of lineups. This was a great contest. We had 3 guys who were close. This was an exciting contest when many bodybuilding contests are boring. And the way they were worked at the end gave you that mano-to-mano type thing. They were battling. I mean, they were exhausted at the end. I mean, how many shots did they do in that last comparison? So I think it was a great show. 3 great guys. I don't agree with the result, but it was a good night for bodybuilding and a good night for fans to watch a contest.
Yeah, a lot of fans are going to agree to disagree, but on the merits of guys competing, I know you have an opinion on it.
The discussion of where are the guys at these shows, it keeps getting brought up. I've had the discussion with Peter. I've had it with Bob. And it's one of these things where it's like, man, we got to, you hit it. The promoters are getting upset. The fans are getting upset. We don't want to come into a show where there's one name who we know is going to win. We want to see guys battle it out. And I had spoken with Fuad before the show, a little bit on camera, a lot off camera. And one of his reasons for coming here was just his buddy John Meadows wanted to do the show. That's half of the reason Fuad went to Vancouver. And, he was in good enough shape in Vancouver, figured he'd come here. On the business side of it, he can take a look at the rest of the lineup and realize he's going to come out ahead on a payday, which he did. So, I mean, it's a win-win-win for Fuad. Gets to compete with his buddy, walks away with a decent payday. He looked really good. I was a little bit concerned this morning. Now, going to your topic of is it a bad move to compete this close to the Olympia, some pictures were floating around online a few hours before prejudging, and if you guys have seen those on MD, he looked really flat, really super depleted. And that question that we talked about, is this a bad move for Fuad, started to seem like maybe it was. He came out at prejudging. Peter and I were like, wow, he did something crazy to fill out. He worked with John Meadows, so obviously those two have a pretty solid game plan down. As a bodybuilding fan, first and foremost, it was great. Steve Weinberger put these guys through the ringer as much as I've ever seen a judge put guys through the ringer. And the fans loved it. The media loved it. And even the guys up on stage. At one point, he said to the guys, he's like, all right, guys, you ready for another round? And Fuad was like, hell yeah, let's do it. And so it was, like Peter said, it was a really good night for bodybuilding.
It was great. It was old school, in the trenches. Steph Pavlik and Michael Lockett rounded out the top 5.
Yeah. Pavlik, I think it's a breakthrough for him. He's got the potential to sort of go forward and develop. And discussed Michael Lockett before. He's a unique bodybuilder in terms of his muscle composition, but he just didn't hit it today. He's got this freaky separation that nobody else has got, and but this is his first year competing as a pro. He's done a few contests, so hopefully he's learning from that, and next year he'll come in and produce the Michael Lockett that we think he can be.
Any other stories at this contest? Of course, Max picks up the win. He's now set for the Olympia, and of course, we love to talk about guys qualifying for the Olympia. And I always say it's interesting, kind of circling back to that topic. The Olympia is a great show. It's the best show in the world. It's the best bodybuilders on the planet. But these other shows are important. These other shows are good. And these other shows are the lifeblood of our sport. And as much as we start to talk about maneuvering and qualifying, look, Fuad Abiad's not winning the Olympia, whether he does this contest or not. He's probably not even in the top 7 or 8 if he does this contest or not. So I love the fact, and I know I've kind of said it over and over again, but I got to keep going because it's an important topic. It's important for the sport that these guys come out and compete and not just obsess over the Olympia. But any other storylines emerge from this year's PBW Championships?
I think the big one, and I almost feel like Peter here, the big one, throwing in that pun, is Akeem Williams. You know, he was a little bit off in Chicago, and coming into this show, the buzz was, you know, talking to people in the industry and the people that I talked to before the shows, they said, oh, Akeem's 10 to 15 pounds heavier than he was in Chicago, which, you know, raised a lot of question marks with me because he was in pretty good condition in Chicago, but he definitely had some improvements he needed to make on his conditioning. So to come in heavier just, you know, 4 or 5 weeks later, I'm not sure what the strategy was there. He's absolutely huge, and I mean, you gotta see the guy walk out on stage in person to really get an appreciation for how big and how freaky he is. His legs might have been a little bit downsized in the past. He's looked like he's brought those up, and everything else has gotten bigger as well. He really needs to nail it. And the thing that we had talked about earlier is we really hope we don't see a case of another Lionel Bayaki or another one of these guys where show in and show out, and then it becomes year in and year out. You keep saying, what if, what if, what if? Obviously, there's no shortage of mass in Akeem, and he's one of these guys who can 100% afford to show up incredibly flat as a bodybuilder can get, as long as he's in good shape. And so I hope moving forward, Akeem can get a game plan together that brings him in top condition, because if he does do that, he's going to be walking away as the winner of these shows.
Any other storylines, Peter?
Well, I'd like to add to Akeem. You know, we have to remember that 5 years ago was when he took up bodybuilding. He was 146 pounds. He was a basketball player. Is that ringing any bells? You know, the thing for him is, what's his problem? He's not like every other guy. You've got to bring your lats up. You've got to bring your legs up. You've got to do it. He's got it. He's got it all. He just needs to chisel it and get into contest condition, and then he's going to fly up those rankings. And he's, you know, the thing is, he's a very intelligent guy. He's had a good education. He's not like stupid. He knows. I talked to him, but he knows what he's got to do, and hopefully, you know, we'll get it done. But 5 years of training, and he looks like that, gained like 100 pounds.
Yeah, bright future. Al Augusti, a big story last night. Max Charles, a big story tonight. Also some big stories over on the women's side. Give us a quick breakdown on the women's bodybuilding side.
Yeah, on the women's bodybuilding, a close 1 and 2 between Margie Martin and Alana Shipp. Kind of apples and oranges. Margie a little bit bigger, a little bit more muscular. Still good structure and aesthetics. I like to call her Mini Dexter because that's what she reminds me of. Both really good competitors. Neither of them were really conditioned, and that was kind of the storyline across that top 5. Any one of these girls, Isabella Terrell, Jacqueline Fuchs, any of these girls had shown up really sharp. I think they kind of all left the door open a little bit for each other, but you know, I don't think anybody's going to complain about Margie in first place, and she can do really well at this upcoming World Championships for the women in 2 weeks because she's already in pretty good shape. She's right there, and as anybody who's competed knows, when you're already close to competition shape, 2 weeks is a lifetime to really tune things up.
In 2 weeks, of course, as you mentioned, the Rising Phoenix, which is basically the new Miss Olympia, if you will. That's going to crown the world's top bodybuilder, top female bodybuilder, Jake and Crystal Wood and their crew at Wings of Strength. Behind that, along with Tim Gardner. Overall, though, I was impressed with the stage presentation among the female bodybuilders.
Well, particularly Jacqueline Fuchs, who won the Best Posing Award. And I mean, she's a newcomer to this side of the pond. This morning, she got the second call out. Tonight, she got the first call out. I think she's got a great future. And you're right. I mean, she led the way with the posing. But the women are so much more inventive and polished at getting it together instead of boom, bang, clash, bang. Hey, give me some of this. You know, they just get on with it. It's a flowing routine, you know, and men can learn from that.
Boom, bang, clash, bang. Give me some of this. Give me something on the women's fitness side.
The women's fitness, I'm a huge fan of fitness, and Peter is as well. One of the really exciting events that we see every night, you know, in the past, Tampa's been really good, and I hate to sound like I'm dogging on these girls, but it was a pretty sore disappointment overall from the fitness routines. We had a couple of good ones. Your winner, Whitney Jones, I think she made up for the rest of the crowd. We were looking at some still photos that you guys are going to be able to see online coming up here tonight. I swear to God, she was 7-8 feet in the air. I mean, it is absolutely unbelievable how athletic Whitney is. Put on a stellar routine. I think an easy win for her in a lineup that really left a lot to be desired.
The great thing about these Tim Gardner shows is all the divisions are here, and regardless of what you're into, there's a division for you. And it's become a huge event, especially for the women's bodybuilding who don't get as many opportunities to compete, and this has become obviously one of their high marks on the schedule. One of the other high marks on the evening, we got to see a bit of a cameo from one of the great legends of the game, Vince Taylor. It was my great privilege to present the Ben Weider Achievement Award to Vince Taylor, and it's an award we've given out each and every year to some of the legends of the game, and Vince Taylor, of course, with 22 wins. Peter, you and I have talked about this on a few occasions. When you have those conversations as to who are the greatest bodybuilders of all time, for some reason, Vince Taylor and his 22 victories, his multiple Olympia top 3 finishes, his name doesn't always come up in the conversation, and I think tonight he got some of the recognition that he deserves.
Yeah, and it's all down to you and whoever makes those decisions, the Weider family. So it was very good to see it. Yeah, Vince, he won like 15 or 16 Open Pro shows, and not many people have done that. I know he's second on the list when you add in the Masters, but it's difficult to sort of, well, it's not difficult because I'm going to explain it because I'm a storyteller. When he came out at the 91 Olympia and did the Terminator for the first time, nobody had ever seen that type of thing before. It's been copied ever since by all sorts of people. And then zone in on Lee Haney or whatever. The audience were on his feet. You don't get a standing ovation many times at the Olympia. Mike Christian was roaring at the front. It was electric because we'd never seen anything like that before. Vince had been renowned for doing the slow, smoochy stuff, and then he comes out with this completely revolutionary routine that became his signature. And it was a night to remember. The 91 Olympia, for many reasons, was a hell of a night. And Vince played his full part in making that a night.
Vince won the 88 Nationals overall. Less than a year later, he was top 3 at the Olympia. Those are things that don't happen. That's an unbelievable thing. And then, of course, so he accepts the award tonight. And then Bob, being Bob, queued up some music. And we got a little taste of that performance from the great Vince Taylor.
Yeah, the crowd really loved it. And again, one of the things about these Tim Gardner shows is he really makes sure the athletes are taken care of and the fans are taken care of. Giving Bob a little bit of leeway, I think, is a great thing. You guys know he's a lot of fun. Vince was kind of a little bit hesitant, didn't have his music, so they went over Tim Gardner's son on the music tonight. They found some music Vince wanted to pose to. He got up there, actually put together probably a posing routine, like, if I'm being honest, was better than most of the guys that were up here tonight. Some slower music was hitting some classical poses. I did get a few pictures up of that, but it was a lot of fun. And the biggest thing is at 59, he is still in phenomenal shape, and he's still pretty big.
It was a great part of the evening. And Tim, if you're watching, you are one of the very best at what you do. I mean, he makes everyone feel very special here at this event. And I'm going to let you have the final word on this year's PBW Championships here in Tampa.
Well, it was a great all-round event over 2-3 days, the press conference and everything. And it's all down to Tim and his team. I've said this before, this contest to me is like got the most family feel about it, grassroots. It reminds me of going back to my early days in bodybuilding where it was all enthusiasm, volunteers. It wasn't all about the money and everything. And what filters through the team that works for them, because I love them when they talk to the athletes and say, this is your day, we're here for you, we're going to take care of you, anything you want, you ask us. Other shows we've seen a different approach. So it all comes down from Tim with his personality and his philosophy, and it really is a joy to come to this show.
I want to thank everybody out there at MD for hanging out with us all weekend, and it's been our great privilege to cover this year's festivities here in Tampa. For David Bay and Peter McGuff, I'm Dan Solomon for MuscularDevelopment.com.